And welcome to episode number 11 of the Authentic Discipleship Podcast. My name is Jonathan Ciecka, and I am joined here by Miss Lacey Hazlett. Lacey, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lacey, tell me a little bit about you growing up. What was a young Lacey Hazlett like?
Oh, my goodness. I didn't have a typical childhood. So, my mom was married and divorced 9 times. My siblings are all about 20 years older than I am. They were from husband number 1. I was husband number 7. So after a while, I stopped with the names and just gave them numbers. But I grew up, how should I say this? My family owned a gentleman's club.
Got it.
That's how I grew up. So young Lacey in Michigan lived a very Sons of Anarchy is what I kind of attribute my childhood to.
It was actually a documentary on your life.
Yes, absolutely. Scary. Yeah. But then we moved, husband number 8 moved us to the end of the world, Unionville, Tennessee.
Oh my goodness. Unionville, Tennessee.
From Detroit.
Oh, wow. That is, okay, yeah, that's pretty much the end of the world.
Yeah. So I came here and I thought, wow, they really hate me. We didn't have a stoplight. We still don't. Mm-hmm. That was, 20-something years ago. But moving here, I was 15, found my teenage boyfriend, got pregnant at 15, and she is kind of where my story changed. She changed everything for me. I did not become a Christian until in my 30s, but my 15-year-old self that gave birth to another child, that child is who brought me to God years and years later. So, child Lacey wasn't a child very long.
You grew up real quick.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. And then, so going forward from there, having your first kid and living life from there, when would you say you started to come into a relationship with God? What did that look like?
So, Caitlin was probably 18 years old, 18 or so. And she had always been going to church. She went to a small Southern Baptist church in Unionville and ended up, I have no idea how she found the experience, but she landed here. And she started coming here and something changed in her. She had always gone to church, sadly by herself. I did not go with her. And she just kept talking about this place. I did not realize that I was in a horrible place in my life. And then one day I was driving down the road and I was like, man, my family would be so much better off without me. I remember thinking about what if I just ran into that telephone pole? And then I went home and I remember just walking in the door to Dave, my husband, and I was just sobbing. And I said, I need to go to church. And he said, okay, where are we going? And I was like, I want to go where Caitlin goes. I want what Caitlin has. Mm-hmm. So that Sunday, we came here, and that was February 2017, and never looked back.
Wow.
Been here every Sunday since.
It's interesting how many of those stories we hear around here of people whose kids started to come into a relationship, and then that's really what brought them in. Because I think typically when people think of it's the parents bringing the kid, kicking and screaming, but it's really interesting to see those scenarios where it's the exact opposite. So
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
Who has been a disciple maker in your life? Who has led you spiritually and kind of helped bring you to the place where you're at now? So from 2017 on, what did that look like?
So Kathy Gentry was a really big part of pouring into me. Her and her husband have moved. They don't attend here anymore. I think they're in Alabama. But one thing that really led me to want to stay here was the first weekend I was here, I heard about Embrace Grace, which was helping young women in an unexpected pregnancy.
And you hear that and you're like, that's where I need to go.
Yep, I knew exactly. That's where I needed to go. And so she was kind of the lead over that whole ministry. And man, she really pushed me. She pushed me hard to where a year later I was leading Embrace Life, which
Awesome.
is kind of like the next step for those women.
Mm-hmm.
She really pushed me hard. My husband has been really, really pouring into me just as a husband, as a leader. And then just the women at this church, all of them, younger than me, older than me, they have all been pouring into me, whether they know it or not.
So when you say that Catherine just really pushed you very hard, what did that look like? In what areas was she pushing you?
She was, you know, I didn't pray in front of people. And she would be like, all right, Lacey,
You're up to bat.
go ahead. And I'm, go ahead and what? She's like, pray us out. And I remember like, I thought I was going to die that she would ask me to do that. But she would push me into situations like that. Or, you know, she would have me open up a session with the girls. And then I started leading a session. And then I started leading the entire Embrace Life, and she kept Embrace Grace. So it was a step-by-step thing. But, I mean, no warning, just pushed me off the cliff.
Yep. Here you go. No, that's
Yes.
awesome. Very cool.
Yes.
So what we're talking about today is difficult situations and difficult conversations. So right now you do HR here at The Experience, and you've been doing that for quite a while, right?
Yes, yes. So I was in, at 18, I fell into sales, and I didn't suck at it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So they let me stay around for a while. And then I moved up to a sales manager there, where in a management role, you're still doing a lot of HR responsibilities. But then I've transitioned to a different job where I was really in that HR role for about 5 years. And came here and initially started out in finance. But the HR in me couldn't let some things go, and then finally Phil was like, maybe
Well, if you're going to do
need
this, we might as well give you the
yes,
title.
Yes. So, and it definitely suits what I do better, what I do well better. So,
And I'm sure in all that time in HR, you've never really had to have a difficult conversation or a difficult situation come up as the sarcasm continues
No,
to...
not once.
Yeah.
not one time.
So general, like, broad stroke principles, when something comes up where it's like, hey, we really don't want to have this conversation, but we need to, what are some principles that you use in those conversations?
So those conversations were a lot easier when I wasn't a Christian because I didn't care.
Right.
I didn't care about what happened after that conversation. I got straight to the point and made sure that they understood what we were talking about. But then I just kind of forgot about it. It's a lot different. It's a lot harder as a Christian. As a Christian, pray before you talk to somebody about something that's going to be difficult for them to hear. Always do that first. Always, regardless of what the situation is. And there's probably a better way to say this, but you have to be cruel sometimes to be kind.
How's that?
Meaning, sugarcoating doesn't help anybody.
I see what you're saying.
What it will do is dancing around an issue will cause confusion. It will make somebody feel like their action or their behavior is less than what it was, and it doesn't address the problem. So what happens is that person leaves thinking that it wasn't that big of a deal, and the chances are it's going to happen again.
Right.
Don't dance around things. Look them in the eye. Don't be afraid to say what you need to say. Say it clearly, keep it short, and then let them process it. Don't be afraid of the quiet. Let them process it.
The long and uncomfortable silence.
Yes.
Yep. And that's kind of an interesting dichotomy to hold, where we don't want to sugarcoat something and make it seem like it's less than what it was. But like you're saying beforehand, before you were a Christian, it was a lot easier to just say, hey, this is how it is.
Yep.
Go and deal with it. Don't do it again. Whereas now we're in the context of a relationship with this other person trying to do this in a loving way. That's a lot more difficult.
It is. And I think that you always address the issue first with them. Give them a chance to process. Give them a chance to ask questions. Give them a chance to say they don't agree with you. And it's okay if they don't agree with you. It doesn't mean that they're right in that or not. But listen. And then always have a plan for them. Make a plan with them when they leave. That's what I was missing before I was a Christian. You know, I would walk away, wipe my hands of it. We're done with this conversation. But as a Christian, you don't want them to walk that alone. You share something with them, you know, listen, recently I failed too. Like, this is what happened to me. It's not the same. Like, you're not comparing stories, but I've also failed. And let's talk about some ways that we can prevent this from happening again. That way you're not just leaving them hanging, and they actually feel loved and that they're cared about. That's a huge difference in those types of conversations.
And when you can open it up empathetically like that of, hey, I've been there. I understand some of what you're going through. Again, not exactly, not trying to compare, not doing the exact same scenario, but having that humility to admit that, kind of taking the log out of your own eye before the speck in theirs, that is huge. And I think goes a long way towards making people feel like, oh, Lacey's not coming at me or Jonathan's not coming at me. They're trying to help me.
Right.
Which is a huge difference from this is a problem, go fix it. And hey, let's figure this out together.
Yeah. I can say that I've had harder conversations here in 2 years than I probably had in 10 years combined in my other positions.
Wow.
And the people here are still my friend.
You can tell them what's up and they still like you.
Yeah. And if some of those people that saw me, that used to report to me, they saw me in Walmart, they would just kill me with their dagger eyes because I left them hanging, because I didn't care. And, man, it's just such a difference in the outcomes.
Now, here's something that I'm curious about. So in the HR world, I would imagine that most of the difficult conversations that you have to have, normally it's like a third party reporting that the situation is going on. Is that right?
Occasionally. Sometimes it is something's been brought to my attention, and then I go and have to say something. Sometimes there's hearsay and you have to do investigations. One thing that I always do is I don't make any assumptions at all. I listen to all parties, and I base stuff off of the facts, and I speak in facts. I speak in truth. This is black and white, what's happened, what's not happened. And I find that when you can show people that you've really done your due diligence, even if it doesn't necessarily align with their side of the story, they can see where you're coming from, and they can see that it was fair. Yeah.
And in a Christian context, I think a lot of that goes to knowing the Bible well enough to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing here in Scripture. What's your take on that? How do you view that, and how does that apply to your situation here? And having the same source of truth, I imagine, makes a huge difference in versus we're just trying to figure this situation out with, hey, here is what we know to be true. We've both kind of agreed to this in an a priori sense. Now let's figure out how to apply to this and how to respond to it in our lives.
Exactly. It's a roadmap I didn't have before, which is awesome. I mean,
Roadmaps help.
It really, really is, because it takes the pressure off of me as a person. Trying to, I'm not trying to dictate what's right or wrong. That's beyond me. I'm just helping us stay in the lines of what the Bible says is right and wrong, and what we've agreed to live by. And it makes it a lot easier for me to have those conversations when I have that roadmap in front of me.
Yeah, and there's something we talk about in the workbook where it's not your job to convince them of what is right. And I really like how you phrased that, because what we talk about here in the workbook is that if they can be convinced by your reasoning and your understanding, they can be convinced of the exact opposite thing by someone else with their reasoning and their human understanding. But if we're going to the same source of truth with the Holy Spirit and the Word here in front of us, it's not about me trying to convince you, hey, this is what's right. This is me saying, okay, here's what we have both agreed to. Let's look at how this applies to your life, which is huge.
Yes, yes. And I think it puts pressure back on it. It's really convicting. I think, like, okay, yes, you're right. I did agree to this. Maybe I need to take a step back and relook at this, and it puts some ownership back on them, because ultimately it's their relationship with Christ. As a brother and sister in Christ, we're just here to help guide them and stay within the truth that we all say we're going to follow.
And that's a really good point as well, that our responsibility is for our actions and what we say. We're not responsible for how they receive that or what they do about that afterwards. Again, we do that in such a way that it sets them up for success, and we hope that they do respond in those ways. But if they don't, we did everything we could, and it's really difficult to leave it up to that sometimes.
It
Because
is.
as someone who likes to have control over absolutely everything, it's hard to say, hey, I just don't have control over what you're going to do with this. But that's where we lean on God's sovereignty and his love for all people, and just know and understand that he's going to work this out for his own good.
Exactly.
So going back again to kind of like how we find out about these situations, I think in a discipleship relationship, it generally comes from hey, we've been meeting up for a while. I have this problem in my life. Let me present it to you. And that catches people off guard sometimes. And it's difficult to know what to do in those exact situations of, hey, my marriage is falling apart. We've never talked about this. What would you say is a good, like, in that moment, next step of, I don't know what to do about this?
Right. So first, say, I don't know what to do about this.
That's a pretty good first step.
I mean, like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry that whatever this is, that this is happening. Be there with them in the moment. If they're opening up to you, it's not necessarily because they're looking for the answer. It's because they're vulnerable, they're hurting, they're scared, they're confused. Be there for them. Like, be the physical hand of Jesus. Hold their hand. Let them feel something there. Pray with them once the situation has calmed down. So that is my ultimate goal when one of those surprising situations come up that I'm not prepared for, is to de-escalate. Immediately de-escalate. Because nobody is thinking clearly when emotions are elevated.
And when you say de-escalate, what does that mean exactly?
That is the holding the hand. That is... somebody was in my office this week, and I was just reminding them to breathe. Let's just breathe. Breathe together. Hold somebody's hand. Pray with them. Get them to a place where they're calm. And then let them know, listen, I've heard you. Here is what I'm going to do. And maybe it's getting a young woman in touch with our women's pastor, Meridell. Maybe it is getting a woman that found out her husband is cheating on her with one of the male pastor, or one of the pastors here that has gone through something similar. Letting them know that you might not have the answer, but you're not leaving them alone.
And I like how you mentioned all the other resources that are available to you as well. It's not just on you in that situation. There are a cloud of witnesses around you to join you in that. And there's no reason that you can't reach out to a pastor, a professional counselor, rehab centers, anything like that. These resources are available for us to go out and actually use. And sometimes it's making the call with the person of, hey, let's find out if S2L has any openings. Let's find out if Renewed Life has any openings. Let's get you an appointment with a counselor this week. And something that I think you kind of indirectly mentioned, it's really important not to act shocked when that initial bomb drops. And it gets a little bit easier with time, but people will come up to you with just crazy situations. And I think one of the worst things to do is, oh my gosh, how could you do that? Like, what the heck are you doing? Yep, that would not go well.
No. Well, I have practiced my surprise, and I say, okay. Okay. And then we start talking about next steps. Like, okay.
Now that everyone has had the chance to take a deep breath, get a little bit
Yes.
calmed down from the situation, now with our slightly more logical brains than they were just a moment ago, where everything was on fire and the world is as terrible as it possibly can be.
Yes.
Okay, take a deep breath. Okay, what can we do about this now?
Yep. And then it's just, and even if you help them find their next step, they're not walking away from you with nothing. Like sometimes you just have to take the next step. Sometimes you just have to get through the next hour. And if you can help them do that and know that when they leave you, they know that they're still not alone, that something else is coming. I'm going to have a counseling appointment. I'm going to meet with a pastor. Somebody is going to call me. I'm going to be okay. That goes a long way.
Absolutely. And there are some times where, despite our best efforts and our everything that we could have done, it just doesn't work out.
It's true.
What are some signs, particularly in a discipleship relationship? Again, I know this might look a little bit different in HR context, where someone, we've tried everything we can. They don't want to change. They're displaying really no remorse for what's going on, or maybe they are outwardly, but their actions really don't speak to that at all. How do we handle that?
So I think I kind of look at it like parenting a little bit. I think sometimes I go back to when Jesus was like, you just got to shake the dust off sometimes. Sometimes you have to let people fail. And you have to know that they have failed because they chose to. If you've offered everything that you can, like I can give my children everything they need to be responsible adults. But if by the time they're 20 and they're in the basement playing video games and, not making any kind of steps towards the future to, better themselves or have any dreams or anything, at some point, like I've done all I can. And then you just hope that they come back. And that's okay. And we have to realize that. I think that's harder on us, the disciplers, the parents, to let the people we love fail. But sometimes that's the only way they're going to learn.
Absolutely. And it really is tough in those scenarios to say, hey, if this is the path you're going and I've done everything I can to convince you this isn't going to end well, I'm going to let you find out that it's not going to end well. And that sucks for everyone involved. But for some people, that's the only way that they're going to find out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, no, that's tough. And then the best case scenario when that's already happened is that they do come back eventually. And rebuilding that relationship can be a little bit weird at first.
Oh, yeah. I think that it takes a lot of humility on the person that comes back. But it also takes a lot of forgiveness because it hurts us. It hurts. It hurts when we have to let them go and we feel like everything we did was for nothing. And then they come back. We got to let those feelings go. And we've got to be prepared to remember the times that we stumbled and God graciously let us crawl back and move forward.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the prodigal son right now, and the father celebrates when he comes home. It's not, well, what the heck were you doing for all these years? It's finally you've come back. But at the same time, there is the older brother in the background that it seems like a lot of people forget about when they're reading that story, where he goes, what the heck? I was here doing the right thing the whole time, and here comes my brother who wasted all this money all these years, and he's getting a party, and I never got a party for doing the right thing the whole time. That's a pretty good ego check of it's not about you. It's about the guy coming back.
That's right. And you should be just excited about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Lacey, any final thoughts on these just difficult situations, difficult conversations that we have with people?
Yeah, just be patient with yourself. You're not always going to get it right. You'll get it wrong a lot, even after many years of doing it. Stop talking and listen. Most of the time, that's just what somebody needs, is somebody to listen. De-escalate and get to as a level place as you can before you start trying to redirect somebody. Make sure that they are in a place that they can understand and kind of grasp what you're saying. And always help them make a next step before you leave them.
That sounds like a pretty good place to end it.
Yeah.
Lacey, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.